At 22, Amara Brooks gave herself to a stranger, not knowing he would become her CEO. He was a man who built an empire of glass and steel yet lived inside it like an exile, guarded by ghosts of mistakes and convinced trust was a luxury he could no longer afford. She was a dreamer whose heart had been broken, a young woman who ran not to find love but to forget it, believing that if she disappeared for a while she could start again. For one night she would dare to be free, convinced tomorrow would be a blank page she alone could write. He was a billionaire who commanded horizons but couldn't quiet the loneliness inside. She was 22, on the edge of conquering New York, unaware her one night of freedom would become her most beautiful prison. This isn't a story about an office fling. It's about what happens when fate binds two people who weren't searching for each other. It's about how a dangerous secret can create the truest connection, and how the one person you try hardest to forget becomes the one you cannot escape. Amara closed her suitcase for the third time that morning. The sharp click echoed in her small bed-stuy apartment, final and unforgiving, making her stomach twist. She sank onto the edge of the bed, staring at it. To anyone else it was just luggage. To her it was a coffin for the life she thought she had. With a trembling sigh she opened it again. The neatly folded clothes mocked her. The wardrobe of a woman who once believed in planned futures and promises whispered in the dark. Her hand, unsteady since Tuesday, brushed against the dark blue velvet box tucked between two sweaters. She didn't need to open it. The solitaire diamond inside weighed on her like a cold star of extinguished hope. Closing her eyes brought no peace, only the memory she wanted to bury. The warm restaurant in the West Village, Brandon's confident smile, the gleam of the ring as it slid onto her finger. 3 weeks later, she had sat at that same table alone, waiting for a man who never arrived because he was in someone else's arms. She hadn't found out through a dramatic confession, but through the quiet betrayal of his phone buzzing on the glass coffee table while he showered. She had seen the name she didn't recognize and the message that carved her open. "Can't wait to smell you again." Her stomach lurched. For 2 years she had thought his scent, a blend of sandalwood and the handmade soap he swore by, was home, safety, love. Now it was nothing but the smell of betrayal. Amara boarded the ferry to Martha's Vineyard with her suitcase by her side, the salt air stinging her lungs as if it wanted to purge everything she carried inside. She watched the horizon shift from the gray sprawl of the city to the quiet outline of Oak Bluffs. The island looked calm, detached from the noise of the life she was trying to escape. For the first time in weeks, she felt something that resembled relief, though it was fragile, like glass in her chest. The bungalow she rented was small and plain, painted white with weathered shutters and a porch that faced the ocean. The floorboards creaked under her steps, the smell of salt and cedar seeping into every corner. She unpacked slowly, each folded piece of clothing a reminder of who she had been before betrayal turned her world inside out. The silence pressed in around her until she couldn't stand it. She opened the windows wide, letting the crash of waves drown the echo of Brandon's voice in her head. Days passed in a rhythm she built for herself. She woke early, laced up her sneakers, and ran along the shoreline until her lungs burned and her legs shook. She cooked simple meals, read books she barely absorbed, and watched the tide rise and fall from the porch steps. At night, she lay in bed with the window cracked open, the ocean's steady breathing pulling her toward a restless sleep. Yet with every routine came the gnawing sense of loneliness. She had fled to this island believing solitude would heal her. But solitude was not silence. It was noise of another kind. It filled her ears with the questions she didn't want to answer, the ache of what she had lost, and the bitter truth that she had trusted the wrong man for too long. On the 7th night, she stood in front of the mirror longer than usual. Her reflection looked different, touched by the sun and sea air, her skin glowing, her eyes clearer. She pulled a dress from the closet, something simple yet sharp, and let her curls fall freely around her shoulders. For weeks she had hidden from her own image, but tonight she wanted to see herself again. When she slipped on her sandals and stepped out into the night, she wasn't looking for redemption. She was only searching for distraction. Oak Bluffs was alive with the quiet hum of vacationers and locals, lanterns glowing softly along the street. She walked toward the Lantern, a bar near the harbor, its windows spilling warm light and the faint sound of jazz into the cool evening air. Inside, laughter rose above the clink of glasses, and the scent of whiskey and grilled food wrapped around her. She found a spot at the bar, ordered a drink, and let the glass rest in her hand, cool and solid. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel like a victim, or a woman with a broken engagement, or someone running from her own life. She felt like herself, unguarded, untethered, and on the verge of something unknown. That was when she noticed him. She felt his eyes on her before she even turned. At the far end of the bar, a man sat alone, his posture relaxed but his presence undeniable. The kind of presence that didn't come from clothes or wealth, though the tailored jacket and understated watch suggested both, but from a quiet authority, as if the room bent toward him without realizing it. Their gazes met, and for a moment she forgot to breathe. His eyes were sharp, not hungry but searching, as though she were a puzzle he intended to solve. She looked away, heart racing, but a heat spread through her chest that her drink couldn't cool. When he finally moved toward her, the crowd seemed to part on instinct. He stopped just close enough that she caught the scent of his cologne, clean with a trace of cedar layered over something warmer. "You look like you don't belong here," he said, his voice deep and low, carrying just enough amusement to soften the boldness of his approach. "And you do?" she replied, raising her glass to cover the tremor in her hands. A smile curved across his mouth, slow and devastating. "Maybe not, but I like it better now." He signaled the bartender with the flick of a finger, ordered a second round, and let the silence settle between them. It wasn't uncomfortable, it was charged. Like the seconds before a storm breaks, they spoke then, not of where they came from or what they did, but of lighter things, fragments of life tossed across the polished wood between them. Her favorite authors, his distaste for shallow small talk, the way both of them found noise easier to endure than silence because silence made people think too much. Every answer he gave was direct, unvarnished, as though he had no interest in playing games. At one point, their glasses touched, the toast unspoken but binding. The clink sounded louder than it should have, sealing something neither could name. She drank deep, the cool burn of wine cutting through the warmth already spreading in her veins, and still his gaze never left her. It wasn't predatory. It was intent, analytical, as though he was memorizing her, and for reasons she couldn't explain, she wanted to be memorized. "Let's get out of here," he said at last. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a declaration. He dropped a bill on the bar with a gesture so casual it told her everything about the world he lived in, then extended his hand. Her mind screamed warnings. He was a stranger. She was vulnerable. This was madness, but her body moved faster than reason. She placed her hand in his. His grip closed around hers, warm and certain, and the bar with its chatter and lights fell away. As he guided her toward the door, his hand brushed the small of her back. Not possessive, but steady, grounding. For the first time in weeks, she let herself stop fighting, stop holding the armor tight. She let herself follow him out into the vineyard night, the salt air rushing over them like a benediction. The vineyard night air was cool and heavy with the scent of salt and honeysuckle. The moon floated high and full, spilling silver across the harbor as though it had been waiting for them. Instead of hailing a taxi back to town, he guided her down a quiet path toward the beach beside the resort. The muffled jazz from the lantern faded behind them, replaced by the endless hush of waves rolling onto the sand. They walked side by side, the silence unforced, the tension between them alive but not suffocating. Amara slipped off her sandals, her toes sinking into the cool, damp sand, and each step seemed to drain more of the weight from her shoulders. The ocean whispered against the shore, carrying away the remnants of betrayal she had carried with her to the island. They stopped at the water's edge, the foam lapping at their feet. The moonlight sharpened his profile, carving his features into planes of silver and shadow. He turned to her but kept a respectful distance, as if to ask with his silence whether she wanted him closer. The space between them was electric, a current almost visible in the salt-thick air. "You're trembling," he said softly, his voice nearly swallowed by the waves. She was, though she lifted her chin in denial. "The wind is cold." A slow, knowing smile curved across his mouth. "No, it isn't." He stepped closer, the space halved and the charge doubled. Her heart kicked against her ribs as if trying to escape. "You're scared," he murmured. "Maybe," she admitted, meeting his gaze. "And you? Are you afraid of nothing?" For the first time she saw something flicker in his eyes, a shadow of pain, of old regrets. "I'm afraid of almost everything," he confessed, his voice stripped bare. "But mostly I'm afraid of endings. That's why I like beginnings. and then, without hesitation, he closed the final distance. On Monday morning, Amara dressed with the precision of a soldier preparing for battle. A black pencil skirt, a white silk blouse, and a gray blazer became her armor, pressed and perfect, projecting a calm she did not feel. She studied herself in the mirror. The sun of Martha's vineyard had left her skin glowing. Her curls framed her face with a new confidence, and her eyes, clearer, sharper than before, held something like resolve. She told herself she was ready. The headquarters of DuBois Hospitality Group pierced the Hudson Yards skyline like a needle of steel and glass. The tower shimmered in the morning light, a monument to money and vision, vast and impersonal. As she approached the revolving doors, the rush of cold air from inside made her shiver. The lobby was cavernous, white marble and glass polished to a mirror shine. A kinetic art installation spun lazily in the center, thousands of metal fragments catching the light like a school of silver fish. The sound of expensive shoes echoed across the marble, and the air smelled of espresso and power. Ms. Brooks, the voice was crisp, feminine, and assured. A woman in her 50s approached, her silver-streaked hair swept into a flawless bun, her Chanel suit tailored with military precision. She extended a hand with a grip that brokered no weakness. Dr. Nadine Okafor, Director of Human Resources. Welcome to DHG. Thank you, Amara managed, steadying her nerves. Dr. Okafor's intelligent eyes seemed to weigh and measure her as they walked together toward the elevators. Did you enjoy your time in Oak Bluffs? I hear it's beautiful this time of year. Amara's heart skipped. How did you? Your departure address was on the reimbursement form you submitted. Nadine replied smoothly, with the faintest smile. I trust it was restorative. Yes, Amara murmured, embarrassed by her own panic. It was. The elevator carried them upward with dizzying speed, the numbers climbing far too quickly. Nadine spoke of expansions in Asia, of new investments and partnerships, her voice calm, professional. Amara barely heard her. Her stomach tightened as the doors slid open onto the 72nd floor. The office was a maze of glass partitions and white walls, light flooding in through floor-to-ceiling windows that framed Manhattan like a painting. Beautiful, yes, but cold, like standing inside an iceberg. Nadine led her down a corridor until they stopped before a set of frosted glass doors. Before I show you your desk, Nadine said, her tone suddenly formal, there's a tradition here. Mr. DuBois personally welcomes all new senior hires. It's important to him. Amara nodded, forcing her breathing to steady. She had read the articles, seen the whispers in Forbes and the Journal. Malik DuBois, the visionary who had built DHG into an empire before the age of 40, the man who avoided cameras so successfully that no recent photos existed. Nadine pushed the doors open. Amara stepped into the auditorium, and her heart stopped. There, standing on the stage in a dark suit that fit like it had been sewn onto his body, addressing the room with quiet authority, was the man from the vineyard. The man whose touch still lingered on her skin, Malik DuBois. Her CEO, the intensity of his presence filled every space whether he spoke or not. Light from the floor-to-ceiling windows struck the hard line of his jaw during morning briefings. And for one reckless heartbeat, she would remember his mouth on hers beneath vineyard stars. When his gaze swept the room and caught hers, even for an instant, her pulse stumbled. She looked down quickly, but the burn lingered on her skin. By Wednesday, she was waiting with colleagues for the elevator when the doors slid open, and there he was, alone. The world shrank to chrome walls and the muted scent of cedar as she stepped inside. She pressed herself into the farthest corner, eyes fixed on the numbers racing upward. The silence grew thick, almost alive. She could hear her own too-quick breathing. 30 seconds stretched like an eternity, every tick of the digital panel pounding in her chest. When the doors opened, she fled without looking back, certain she could still feel his eyes on her until the metal closed. Thursday was worse. She had prepared a presentation for the strategy team when the door opened and Malik walked in. Please continue, he said, his voice calm, professional, too smooth. He sat at the far end of the table, but his presence pressed on her like a hand. She spoke, faltering once, the data tangling on the page as her throat tightened. Heat prickled her skin. Humiliation clawed at her ribs. Then his voice cut through, steady and low. Demographic data for experiential travel, he prompted, filling the silence without patronizing. His eyes met hers across the table, and in them was no judgment, only understanding. It undid her. "Thank you," she murmured, forcing herself to continue, finishing on autopilot. His nod at the end, "Excellent analysis, Ms. Brooks." Gaines was perfectly neutral, yet it seared. Praise in front of others, protection disguised as formality. It should have soothed her, but instead it hollowed her out, because the very act of helping made their agreement feel like poison. They had promised to forget. Pretend it was nothing. But every glance, every accidental touch in crowded corridors proved that pretending was impossible. And the more they denied it, the more unbearable it became. It began in whispers, carried on the sterile air of glass corridors. At first, she ignored them. The stray looks exchanged over coffee machines, the sudden hush when she walked into a room. She told herself it was the ordinary scrutiny given to any new hire at DHG, especially one hand-picked for a coveted role. But soon the murmurs sharpened, curling into questions with poisoned edges. She came in too fast. Direct placement. Must have a connection. Pretty face. Nothing else. The words traveled faster than truth, weaving themselves into the culture of the office like smoke. She could feel them clinging to her, invisible but suffocating every time she presented, every time she walked past colleagues who didn't meet her eyes. At lunch one afternoon, she sat across from Derek Shaw, a colleague whose easy jokes usually made the day lighter. Today, though, even he hesitated. "You know what they're saying, right?" His tone was soft, but it still hit her like a slap. Her fork paused mid-air. "I don't care," but she did. The rumors bled into her focus, shook her certainty, made her question whether anyone saw her talent or only the shadow of a man who had once touched her beneath vineyard stars. That night, in the quiet of her Bed-Stuy apartment, she called Keisha. Her best friend didn't let her spiral. "Amara, listen. They're threatened because you shine. Don't you dare dim for them. You didn't get here by accident. Prove them wrong with every report, every meeting, every damn idea. Let the whispers choke on your success." Amara closed her eyes, clutching the phone tighter. She wanted to believe it. She needed to. But the truth was heavier. Every glance from Malik, every unspoken acknowledgement added fuel to the fire. Pretending nothing had happened between them wasn't protecting her. It was destroying her. And soon, she knew, someone higher up would force the question she had been dreading. When Dr. Nadine Okafor called her into the office, Amara expected a routine check-in. Instead, the blinds were drawn and the table between them felt like an interrogation bench. Nadine's expression was calm but unyielding, her voice low and deliberate. "I've been here since this company was little more than a dream in a rented office," Nadine began. "I've watched Malik DuBois build an empire from nothing. He can be demanding, complicated, sometimes impossible, but he is not careless. And he is loyal. These last few months, I've seen him at his worst. And Amara, it's not because of the board. It's because of you." The words struck like a blow. Amara's throat tightened. "Dr. Okafor, let me finish." Nadine leaned forward, her tone sharpening. "Yesterday, the board held an informal vote. They plan to invoke the moral turpitude clause by the end of the week. If they succeed, Malik will be removed as CEO. Amara's breath caught. She had braced for her own termination, not his. Removed, but this is his company. He had a chance to stop it, Nadine continued, her eyes holding Amara's. All he had to do was sign your termination papers. They even had the severance prepared. Any other executive would have protected himself. He refused. He told them firing you would be the biggest mistake of his career. He said he would rather lose the company than sacrifice someone who deserved to be here. The room tilted. Amara gripped the edge of the table to steady herself. He had been willing to risk everything for her. Nadine's voice softened now, not as HR, but as a woman who had seen too much. They'll paint this as favoritism. They'll weaponize whispers. But know this, his choice was not weakness. It was conviction. What you do with that knowledge is up to you. Time is running out for both of you. The silence that followed was suffocating. Amara felt the weight of every rumor, every sidelong glance, and now this impossible truth. Malik DuBois had chosen her over his empire, and sooner than she wanted, the board would demand blood. The boardroom on the 75th floor was a cathedral of glass and mahogany, designed to intimidate. 12 leather chairs circled a polished table, the skyline of Manhattan burning through the windows behind them. 8 board members sat waiting, their expressions carved from suspicion. When Malik entered with Amara at his side, the silence cracked into whispers. Arthur Vance, the chairman, slammed a folder onto the table. This is unacceptable. Ms. Brooks' presence is not required for this discussion. On the contrary, Malik said, pulling out a chair for her with deliberate calm. Her presence is the point of this discussion. She is not here to be judged. She is here as my partner. The word partner detonated in the air, daring them to challenge it. A flush of anger rose up Arthur's neck. This is a violation of the moral clause, favoritism, nepotism. You've compromised this company. Malik leaned forward, his voice steady as steel. You want to fire me based on whispers about a relationship you never even asked me to confirm. So let me end the whispers now. I am in love with Amara Brooks, and I intend to spend my life with her. The room went still. Amara's pulse thundered in her ears, her body caught between terror and pride. Beneath the table, Malik's hand found hers, their fingers locking in defiance. His grip anchored her, told her she wasn't alone. That only makes it worse, a younger member snapped. You've confirmed the conflict of interest. The favoritism. Malik's gaze cut across the table. Favoritism? Amara Brooks was hired on merit. In 3 months, she has optimized our European strategy, producing a projected 8% rise in satisfaction. Millions in revenue. If that is favoritism, then yes, I am guilty of favoring excellence and results. He turned to her then, not as CEO, but as ally. Ms. Brooks, if you please. Her heart hammered, but her voice held steady as she rose. She didn't look at her notes. She looked each board member in the eye. You see a reputational risk. I see this company's greatest asset. What happened between us was not calculation. It was connection. And the truth is this company was built on vision and connection. Remove Malik DuBois, and you are not cutting off the head of this company. You are ripping out its heart. And a body without a heart doesn't survive. The room erupted in protest, but Malik's expression was calm, even as the storm gathered. For the first time, Amara realized what they were truly fighting. Not whispers, not rumors, but the machinery of power itself. And for the first time, she was ready to stand in the fire with him. The kiss in the boardroom corridor said what neither of them could in front of 12 skeptical faces: frustration, fear, and the overwhelming desire that no obstacle had managed to erase. When they pulled apart, breathless, Malik rested his forehead against hers. I need more than stolen minutes in dusty rooms, he whispered, his voice breaking with need. That night, after the storm of arguments and threats, Amara found herself staring at her phone, her heart pounding. A message from an unknown number blinked on the screen. The Peninsula, Chicago, Suite 1812 if you want. No name, no pretense, just a door to a choice she couldn't walk away from. Logic screamed to delete it. Her heart pressed her to go. Hours later she knocked, nerves thrumming. He opened the door in a white shirt, collar undone, whiskey in hand. Relief flickered across his face like sunlight breaking through clouds. You came. I came, she said, stepping into the suite. The door clicked shut behind them, sealing out the world. There were no titles that night, no CEO and subordinate, no empire and risk. Just Malik and Amara, two people finally giving in to what they could no longer deny. They stripped away the distance, the fear, the pretense, revealing themselves in a way the vineyard night had only hinted at. He was no longer the untouchable figure in a glass tower, and she was no longer the girl running from betrayal. They were simply two souls, scarred and searching, finding something like peace in each other's arms. When dawn spilled across the Chicago skyline, they lay tangled in white sheets, talking in hushed voices about nothing and everything. Childhood memories, the stars, the books that had shaped them. It felt impossibly ordinary, impossibly right. Back in New York, the board seethed, alliances shifted, but they stood as a team. Arthur Vance resigned, others fell in line, and the company bent itself around the truth it could no longer deny. Malik and Amara set boundaries. No work at dinner, no stolen meetings without consequence, and for the first time, their partnership strengthened both their lives and the empire. 6 months later, they returned to Oak Bluffs. The same bungalow that had been her refuge now belonged to both of them, a gift he'd given her not as a CEO, but as a man in love. On the beach below, a boy's laughter carried on the wind. Noah, Malik's son from a past chapter, racing the waves with a bucket in hand. He had accepted her with the simplicity only children possess. Amara stood on the deck, Malik's arm around her shoulders, the ocean before them. The vineyard air was the same, but she was not. She wasn't a woman running anymore. She was standing at the edge of a new life. The horizon stretched wide and limitless. And as Malik's lips brushed her temple, she knew the truth she had tried so hard to fight. This wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning.